Hello, everyone. We are back with another episode of Career Hacks and Snacks. It's been a minute, so we're super excited to be back. We took a little bit of the summer off, and now we're here excited with a whole bunch of new people that we are excited to present to you. And I have with me the lovely Mr. David Lovejoy here with me. He is the founder and CEO of CoachFinder.ai. So, David, welcome. So nice to have you here.
Thank you, Kate. Lovely to be here.
Yay. Well, so I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about what you do and tell us a little bit about CoachFinder.ai.
Thank you. Yes, CoachFinder.ai is a boutique coaching platform helping world-class coaches match with aligned clients and helping leaders reach their potential with a proper fit with a coach that actually gets them and helps them reach new heights.
Sounds dreamy, sounds wonderful, and it sounds like something that all of us coaches
Well,
out
it's
here.
alluding to something else we'll talk about.
Yeah, really neat. And I'm super excited to get into it with you. So, David and I met through another person who introduced us, which was so lovely, one of my clients. And I just absolutely connected instantly and thought, what a brilliant, wonderful human being. And I definitely wanted to spend more time with you instantly. So I'm super excited to have this conversation with you today. And our topic is one that's really dear to my heart. And I'm super excited because I feel like every conversation with you has been so rich so far. But the topic today is narratives, is storytelling, and how storytelling is a huge part of everything that we do. But, ultimately in your career, your story is everything. So talk to me a little bit about like how narrative and storytelling is a part of your coaching and, what you've been building.
An analogy that comes to mind is magnetism. So if you look at a magnet and all these iron filings, like you're not sure what is magnetic, you'll find out if you put a magnet in the room. And so those stories that you tell yourself become the magnet, and they're different magnets perhaps attract different, elements in the environment, if you will. And you look at how we can believe in different religions, we can believe in different outcomes for ourselves and others. And sometimes we're surprised in pleasant ways and unpleasant ways. And so being intentional with what kind of magnet you lead with, I think is important. And to your question about how I use it in coaching, how I use it in my life, I think it's important to unearth, perhaps with a client, what stories they're telling themselves and help them bring that to the room rather than say, I think you're like, you don't want to guide someone to an outcome. You want them to lead. But sometimes many things are true at once. And I think we have a tendency to catalog in two dimensions, or like XY like matrices. And that's not exactly accurate. It's a slice in time at best. It's not the whole picture. So allowing a client to tell their story in their own words can surprise both parties. And then you can, as a coach, help them. Like, I heard this. Is that, what does that mean to you? And they're like, oh, I didn't even realize that I said that or that I thought that. And I'm like, that unlocks this thing. And so you're co-creating because, I'll pause here. The adage of, two minds are greater than one, I think is true. You're actually synthesizing a third space.
Okay. Well, first of all, I love all of that. So I want to talk about magnetism, and then I want to talk about sort of the stories we tell ourselves too. But I love that you brought that back to magnetism and that it like brings together all the things that you try to, or don't try to bring together. And I think a lot of times it's like us pulling the pieces off of the magnet too and being
Yeah.
like, is this the one you really want to attract? Is this the one you
Mm.
really want to attract? Whereas you've kind of been sitting with that magnet for a really long time. It's just the way that it is, then it's just automatic. It's like gravity. It's already, there.
Right.
And it's our job to take a look at it. One of the things that I found most interesting about coaching, and frankly myself too, because I feel like people assume that if you're a coach, you're really good at like yourself, figuring
Mm.
yourself out. That is incorrect, right? It is
Yeah.
incorrect that you are good at figuring yourself out just because you're great at figuring other people out.
Right.
But I think that we need things reflected back to us. And I think that, we get really wrapped up in our day to day and who we think we are, that seeing it through a lens of another person that's more objective, I would say, or subjective in a different way,
Mhm.
can really give you a lot of opportunity to see the things in your story that you're maybe missing, or the pieces of your story that you maybe thought weren't important. They're actually really important and maybe have always been important to you and you just didn't realize it. Or are affecting your behavior or affecting your career or affecting how you interact with the world around you, that are not necessarily obvious to you but can be really obvious to another person. So that's, I always joke about, like, I need my own coach. We all need our own coaches. We need those people around us that can be objective about us, because it's really difficult when you're in it, you're deep in it day to day, to be objective about yourself as well. And then
Yeah.
lastly, like, I'd love to tie this to job search too, because my take is, if you don't understand your story, it's really difficult to tell your story to somebody else. So
Mm.
talk to me a little bit about some of the things that you do to help people figure out their story. Talk to me a little bit about how that those pieces of the story can be teased out in process.
Yeah, first of all, well said. I agree with everything you said there strongly. How I help others like unearth their story and align their trajectory to it. Like you touched on it, a lot of us don't realize what we value. We kind of
Mm.
compartmentalize it or hide it for whatever reasons, and that just becomes a new normal. I like your analogy of the shape that the magnet takes once it's already attracted to those things. You just take that as this is what reality is. Whereas like first principles thinking, it's like, well, let's start with what could be. So you look at, let's say, imagination, and let's say reality. I think you could argue either side of that subjectively, but let's just use those as binaries. Some would say that imagination is a waste of time. It's not real, it's not worth thinking about. Others would say you first had to imagine flight before you could study lift and propulsion, and now we travel the world in hours instead of weeks or months. So helping people understand what they would like to be if nothing else mattered, like just start with a clean slate, and then first principles basically build out what would need to be true for that to happen. What would you need to do tomorrow or today or now, and then just kind of teasing out some of those new realities for them. And then lo and behold, you see this change. It's like, how did you do that? I had one client say, "This is incredible. All you're doing is asking me questions. Like, how's this happening?" And we, like you said, we're mirrors to each other. I don't know if this analogy really works, but I'll use it right for now until a better one comes along. But I think that we as humans talking to one another is an extension of the prefrontal cortex. We think of it, our brain is inside our heads. I think it's actually, it extends, to use that imagination from earlier, into others, into the stories that we tell ourselves, what you reflect back to me. I synthesize, I might be pollinating latent seeds in your mind from a previous conversation. And sometimes I reap the fruit of those previous conversations you've had with others in our conversation. And I take that forward into my next one, et cetera. And so we create this palace of a new reality that didn't exist before. And then to confound things, there are like spiral patterns and rhymings from the past as well. So it's not to say that you shouldn't like compare or listen to others, but it's just, like I mentioned earlier, two things are true at once, but that's maybe getting a little bit sidetracked.
I want to answer all of your things. That's where I want to go next. But I want to talk about the idea of the imagination
Mhm.
and bring that to a practical space too,
Mhm.
because to your point, like, you have to be able to imagine it before you create it. But I would also
Mhm.
argue that, when we talk about people searching for their career, searching for what's next, you can also work backwards from what already exists. But a lot of times you don't know what already exists. So I'm thinking in my head, when you said that, I instantly thought of the job you didn't know existed, right?
Right.
Like the job out there, or the thing that, wow, the second you realize, you read through that job description, or the second you recognize what that job is, or that career path, or that whatever thing is that's your passion, that you didn't even
Mhm.
know existed. So there's that piece of it too, where it's about, you have a different like base of knowledge. I have a different base of knowledge. And I could be like, well, but have you ever thought about being a sculptural machinist, which was one of my recent clients that I was like, I
Huh.
had never heard of that before, and somebody could be like, well, what's that? Right? Like, I don't know what that
Mhm.
is. And we could send somebody on a journey where all of a sudden we've opened up something that they never even thought about. And now their imagination is running wild in that space too. So it's all about both that practical and the fantastical piece that is, already in you, and what's already out there, and bringing those two pieces together
Mm,
where, to your point, two heads are better than one. And then
mm,
the other thing you were talking about too, which I thought was really interesting, is like me giving of my frontal cortex and that exchange of pieces being
mm,
so important, right? Like that's how you create community too. And I was thinking about interviewing and the practical application of that as well, in
mm,
that when you have a magical perfect interview that feels like you really connected with somebody, that's maybe what we're talking about, is that
mm,
exchange of information, that I got something from you, you got something from me, and it's a true exchange versus people trying to plug themselves into something that is not necessarily who they are, what they do, just to answer a question or satisfy a need or a requirement or a qualification that somebody is looking for, but instead is that connection of what I have to bring to the table and what you need and what you have to bring to the table, becoming a true connection of, two people versus just I'm answering questions so that I can get a job. And those
mm,
magical interviews, I think, are really important right now because there's so many people sitting in this
mm,
space that sound the same. So
mhm,
being able to be yourself and tell your true story is
mhm.
tremendously important right now. I mean, and I think it's really like, why is it so difficult for people to do that though? Like it's a very, very difficult thing for people to do.
I would add to that, or to build on that, um, a couple of thoughts come to mind. I think what I've observed anyway, and I realize I'm probably, this is my bias being projected out, and so I'm repeating it back, but for whatever that's worth, I see most of us humans acting as male lions in the jungle, full of potential and just conserving energy.
Mm.
And we tend to look at maybe I should be careful with my phrasing here. I've noticed in myself that I tend to look at objectives, and it's like, oh, if that, like, once I reach that, then it's like done. Instead of thinking like a chess master, where it's like, if I position myself here, what would that unlock? And
Mm.
to go back to maybe how you were talking about job search and candidates applying for jobs. Um, One thing that a career advisor in my MBA told me was be very careful or be very intentional with the titles that you choose, because that will determine the metrics of success and also the story that it's telling about you, the kind of character, if you will. And so rather than think, oh, I want this job, this will mean that about me, think about, is this aligned with my goals? Where do I want to be in? Sometimes it's very short term. I mean, there's different situations, but if possible, where would this set me up in 5 years? Um, I, I I don't know if I dare say 10 years these days. It seems like
Yeah,
so
right.
many things are changing, but um, ra thinking about, we're swimming in the ocean rather than like standing on static tiles or something like that. So when you graduate school, I think you didn't really finish anything. You're participating in a continuation. And so it's important to keep your eyes on the horizon and think longer term. Don't gas out. Don't spend. Here's where two things are true at once. Okay, one of my favorite movies is Gattaca with Ethan Hawke
Ethan
and
Hawke and
Uma
Uma Thurman
Thurman,
was in
Jude
that, right?
Law. It's
Yeah.
got a great cast. An
Hmm.
unsung. I think Titanic came out the same year, so it eclipsed
Remember
it.
that movie though? I liked that movie. Hmm.
Yeah, there's a great line in it. I might butcher it slightly. It's been a while since I saw it, but spoiler alert if someone hasn't heard it, but I think the overall gist will be worth it. It goes into this kind of like, semi-dystopian future where we're all kind of like the elite can buy like genetic engineering and stuff and have like perfect offspring or whatever. And Ethan Hawke is one of the characters that his parents couldn't afford that, and so he came out as a flawed human. Oh no. And he had some, I think, like heart defect or something like that. And but he had a dream, and he didn't want to. He wouldn't allow himself to give up. He did everything in his power to reach his dream. And his brother didn't have the problems he had, and they challenged each other to swim. I think it was like across a harbor or something like that. And his brother would gas out. He asked him, how are you doing this? His supposedly handicapped younger, I forget actually the age, but his supposedly handicapped brother is beating him at a physical contest, which doesn't logically make sense. And Ethan Hawke says, you want to know what the secret is? I never saved any energy for the swim back. or I never saved anything for the swim back. And I think that that's really powerful. And it can seem like a contradiction with what I said earlier. And that's something else I want to come back to, is two things being true at once.
Mm-hmm.
So on the one hand, try not to gas out. On the other hand, don't save anything for the swim back. Now, how are both of those things true at the same time? And I think it comes down to your values and the story that you tell yourself. Because if you enjoy what you're doing, if you're aligned with your purpose, you can't gas out. It actually ignites you. Every paddle actually replenishes more energy than you expended performing the action. So you're unbeatable at that point.
I instantly want to go to sports, right?
Sure.
Like I instantly want to go to sports when you're talking about this too. And those Olympic athletes and the teams that just are more than the sum of their parts.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, call it heart, call it energy, call it output, call it whatever you want, resilience. There's a million different things that are involved in being more than you physically are capable of.
Right.
And I think that's such a really interesting way of thinking about the stories we tell too, right? Because if you're telling yourself you're going to fail, like your body is going to go that route. Like it's already thinking in that direction. It's already headed in that direction. And I think the world today feels heavy. So thinking you're going to fail and building up the failure in your mind, or thinking you're not good enough, that's part of the story you tell about your career or who you are. The story that someone else told you one day that you weren't good enough, that like has stuck with you forever. Or the story that the world is telling you that this is all a shit place to be, frankly, and that like we shouldn't be here and everything's bad. I mean, I think all of those things are elements that just weigh down upon you. And ultimately, when you have those conversations, when you tell your story, when you're out there in the world being yourself, trying to tell your story, those are the things that like hold you down versus, open you up. And I had this crazy image when you were talking about like your cortex. Like I'm just like imagining like the spill coming out of you, and that should make you feel lighter. It should not make you feel heavier, right? When you are releasing energy in a conversation, a networking call, a career conversation, a performance conversation, because we talk so much about jobs and how people get them, and interviews and how they have conversations, and how stressful and difficult and hard to navigate and figure out and put those puzzle pieces together just right. But the best conversations we all ever have are the ones where there's a free flow, where it feels easy. Not that it is easy, but where it feels like there's like a connection, and there's ease to it. So I think maybe there's a lesson in that too, to kind of come to a roundabout way of saying, like sometimes you have to put the extra effort in, but to your point, if it's the right thing, it doesn't feel that way. It just feels like you should be doing that, or it's natural to do that, or it feels good to do that, versus feeling, and you can still feel depleted after those type of conversations. Obviously, that's natural, but that you don't feel down or miserable or like you failed in those conversations, and you control so much of that. I think that we talk about interview processes and careers as so much external focus on you, but you control so much of that. And we release so much of that control to our bosses, to our peers, to the people who think things about us, to the interviewers that we are preparing so heavily for, to the job descriptions that intimidate us out there in the world, that we release so much of that control, where if we were to just own our story, really just kind of settle with it and tell it in the right way, we'll always know that we did the right thing. We'll always know that we gave that extra effort or put that extra piece in for it too. Does that make sense?
It does. Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit more about storytelling though. What makes a great story for yourself and sort of for the external world? Like what are the things that a lot of us sort of miss as a part of our storytelling or telling our story out there?
I think you touched on it earlier. To put it in a word, I think that's growth. I think we want growth. We like travel. We like new experiences, new restaurants, new conversations, like you said, that expand us. But the stories we often tell ourselves, as you also touched on, tend to inhibit growth, tend to keep us small or trapped, unimaginative. And perhaps a caveat, like I do think it's important to be responsible with what we imagine. Like, if I imagine that I can fly, I shouldn't just jump off a building and test it out. And I think that coaches can actually, this, isn't a self-serving plug as much as it may seem. I think going back to what we talked about with coaching actually can help us expand our thinking and also responsibly guide it. I don't know if this analogy works, but it's almost like life is like trying to pick up a car, like a jack, to change a tire or something. And it's like you feel like a failure because you just can't pick up a car. It's like, why am I so weak? Like, I need to do this and I can't do this. And I think it's a matter of discovering you were never meant to do it alone. You have all the tools that you need. You're just not using them in the right way. So if you find your tribe, find your story, you can lift more than a car. In Japan, sorry, this is a bit of a sidebar, but it's just this image came to mind.
I love your sidebars.
I used to live in Japan as a tour guide. I don't know how much time we have to go into that whole story. I've got many stories there. Maybe a part two is in the future. But there was a situation where there's a gap between the train platform and the train, and she was stepping on. She might have been distracted, and she fell through. And she was trapped between I don't even know how heavy train and a platform. A fellow passenger noticed, screamed out to everyone. Maybe 100, maybe a few hundred people all pushed the train off of this woman, and she was uninjured. And it was just one example of what's possible when you use the tools that you have. You're capable of superhuman feats, both individually as well as collectively.
I love that. Well, and I think that points me to, and you might argue with me on this one too, that like a lot of people can be coaches. There's formalized coaches, there's life coaches, there's career coaches, there's a lot of different people that exist in the world from a coaching perspective. But I think coaching is a broad like title, we'll say. And there's people in your lives that can be coaches for you, period. Like, sometimes you need that person that's going to give you a kick and tell you the truth, right? And that could be your sister, right? It's not always going to be somebody that you're paying that's going to tell you, those type of things. Sometimes it could be a friend. It could be there's coaches everywhere. And I think there's formal coaches for the things that you really need to accomplish that are specific or unique, or, that we're uniquely skilled in. And then, find the coaches in your world, because that's community. To me, community is the people behind you. Somebody used the term in your career, I have my own board of directors. And that like my board of directors helps give me advice on what I do next for my career. And I think about my career as a company or a brand or something that I'm selling out there. And my board of directors behind me helps me make those decisions. I think that's part of it too, right? These are the reflections, these are the mirrors, these are the people that are in your world that can help you, figure out what the thing is that you need to do next. So having a good board of directors around you is great, and, finding those coaches out in the world. But I think ultimately the broader scope beyond your board of directors is community. It's the people around you. You mentioned your tribe, your group, the people that make sense for you. There's the people who understand what you do. There's the people who don't understand what you do. There's the perspectives that are similar to you, the more homogenous kind of space. And then there's the people who are very different from you that can provide those. And I think all of these things in your world help craft your story, first of all, help you figure out how to tell that story and give you the ability to tell it to different people, different audiences, different groups. And it's still your core story, but it's colored by all of these different influences and people and ideas and, your imagination internally and externally. And I think, if you combine the combination of those people behind you that are super close to you, that are helping you, the ones who are trained and able to guide you in the right direction, and then the community that supports you in the broader sense. And if you find all of those pieces, I mean, it's like, that's magic right there. That's how you find exactly what it is. That's how I feel. That's how I feel about what I've been able to do in my career this last year and a half. Is there were pieces missing and I had parts of things here and there. But when you get that right group around you and you're able to tell your story in a way that feels truly effective, it's like everything opens up. And maybe I'm being overly positive and Pollyanna about it, but I truly have seen it happen with people when they do figure out who they are, what their story is, and how to tell it effectively. So I don't know. I mean, like, have you ever had any career epiphanies in your journey where you were like, oh, wow, I've been doing this wildly wrong, or, oh, wow, this is the right path for me all of a sudden?
Yes, short answer, yes. I'm not sure how to choose just one. I'd like to briefly touch on what you shared there as far as the feedback you can have from your personal board of directors. I think they give you like night vision and the ability to
Mm.
broaden your spectrum of light that you can information that you can discern. For example, when you're left to your own devices, I've found it's easy to overcorrect or to misinterpret, over-index or misinterpret a signal. It's like, oh, I don't like this, so therefore I'm not going to do it or something. Whereas someone who's guiding you could be like, well, could it have meant this? Or could you do
Mhm.
this with that? And it actually expands the sandbox that you can play in. And I've realized personal growth in that and professional growth as well. And so that's another area where I think it could be helpful to calibrate and optimize your path. Of course, at the end of the day, it's all about you. It's your path and your journey, but it's extra tools. And to your question, so there's one analogy which I'm afraid sounds self-serving, but it's the first one that came to mind. So I guess that'll say something about me. But
I love your
the
disclaimers, by the way. I live in the world of disclaimers. I love yours.
so it touches on my experience in Japan. So I'm not Japanese. Surprise, surprise! If this is recorded on video, and but I lived there for some time, and I was a tour guide. And many of my colleagues were Japanese through and through, and you actually can get a license to be a tour guide. And I guess there's pros and cons to that. But some of my colleagues were licensed Japanese tour guides with over a decade of experience. And here I am, lived in the country maybe a decade, didn't speak the language as well as them, wasn't truly like one of them. So what could I possibly offer? It was surprising to a few years later find myself training them, like coaching them on how to do different things within the tourism profession. And I remember this one very experienced guide, her mind just being blown, like, I never thought of that. How did you think of this? And it's like, I didn't know it at the time, but I built upon that subconsciously. And I think that we can be blinded by belonging. And you
Mhm.
just, going back to that magnet analogy, you just take the shape. Like, this is what it is. This is how to do it, obviously, right? And then someone comes in that's different than you, different, you fill in the adjectives. All of a sudden there's like this unlock, like, what, you can do it that way. And again, you don't have to, but it's like an option. It's like now your toolbox is expanded. And I that tickled me. I have a lot of respect for them. I'm not saying I was a better tour guide than them or anything, but it was just a different way of doing things. And it was heartening to see that kind of hero's journey where I was, you've seen this in TV shows where the new person's, underestimated and then winds up being respected over time. And I got that little taste of that myself. So that was an area. And then I just try to remind myself to the extent possible of when I might be on the other side of that. And I might be
Mhm.
both for myself and for others, assuming that this is the only way to do something, that someone who's half my age can't teach me anything, or whatever. And just trying to have that growth mindset and be open. But not too open, my brain falls out.
Yeah, no, I mean like risk and fear is what came into my head when you were talking about that, right? Being somebody new has risk and fear.
Mhm.
And having somebody new come in brings risk and fear, right? On the other side of things too. And I think if we can all get past our risk and fear and realize that there's community at the heart of all of it, we can each learn from each other. So I mean, I think that's a really, and
Yeah.
again, like how you present yourself, if just to tie this all back as we sort of close this out to storytelling, how you come into a group that way and how a group tells their story and you tell your story together in a kind and open way can be tremendously important for that. And I think that is a conversation for another day, because you just talked about a lot of cultural things too that are
Mm.
very, what did you say it was, like the trap of belonging? What that word
Oh,
you used?
blinded by belonging.
Blinded by belonging. Sorry, I've made it even more intense. But the trap of belonging can be very, you think you've got it all figured out. You think you know a lot. You think you're getting similar feedback back to you and mirrored back, and we all get that, like,
Confirmation
yes,
bias.
confirmation. Thank you, confirmation, because we're hearing the same thoughts around us at all times. That, like, how dangerous it is to get stuck in that. And I think
Yeah.
rejection is like that too. Rejection does that in the job process, where like you hear
Mm.
the same rejection over and over and over again, and eventually, that's all you hear. That's what you
Mhm.
believe. That's who you are.
Right.
And to our point of expanding your community, expanding your board of directors, talking to coaches, unlocking things and asking the right questions can get you out of that mindset too. So
Mhm.
lots of opportunity, so much good conversation. We have to keep moving forward, but I want to talk to you for like, every time I talk to you, David, I want to talk like for like 6 more hours. So this is really, it's such a
Feelings
lovely
mutual.
conversation. It is such a lovely conversation. We're going to make a shift right to snacks, because really you had a really great way of putting how like snacks sort of interact in your world and your narrative. So tell me your thoughts on snacks, and then I want to hear what snacks fuel you.
Well, my go-to is chocolate. I love me some
Great.
chocolate.
We can be friends still then.
I prefer like my favorite is with nuts because I like to tell myself that's more of a complete meal. But I could eat it like straight milk chocolate. I like Swiss. I like Belgian. I like German, and I probably like any chocolate. If you have a favorite chocolate I haven't tried, but yeah, it's delicious. The texture of it. You don't have to eat a lot of it to feel like better, and I appreciate I've gone to a few chocolate factories in my travels, and I just appreciate the whole process of making it. And it's just my go-to snack.
All right. So what nuts? What nuts are we putting in? Are we a peanut? Are we an almond? Is it a like any nut? Doesn't really matter.
I'm not, I like all nuts, but I prefer hazelnut for whatever reason. I think there was
No.
this anchor of like Ritter Sport hazelnut chocolate
Oh
that I
yeah.
just loved. And so it's just like, oh, hazel. And also this lady I worked with, adorable, she brought me Starbucks one day, like, and she said, I've got hazelnut syrup in there because that's my favorite. And it was really yummy. So I like hazelnut.
I feel really upset that you brought up hazelnut, because I do have some very
Is that a
traumatic
version?
experience. Yeah, that's just like no. That's a hard no for me. So we'll allow it, but it's a hard no. I used to work at Starbucks when I was 18, I think I was.
Nice.
And
I
I
was
used to work
Diedrich
on
Coffee at 19 and Starbucks bought Diedrich.
baristas. It
Yep.
was I to this day will say that like when I retire, like I want to go back and be a barista, because it was like one of the best experiences of my life. And I would work the 4 a.m. shift, so 4 to
Yep.
noon, and it
Same.
was the most ridiculous
Go
shift.
there
And it went
before
by,
the sun came up.
and it
And
was like that. It was over in five
I
minutes,
actually got
and
flown. One of my customers was a pilot, and he said, "Hey, you want to go up sometime?" I was like, "Sure." And so he picked me up. I said, "What time you get off?" And we rented a Cessna, and like he flew around and got
what?
some like M&Ms and a Pepsi or something. And he's like, "You'll need these. I'll explain why later." And he started doing these parabolas. It's like weightless maneuvers, and you're like catching M&Ms like you're in space or something, and like spinning the soda can. It was a lot of fun.
Trying not to lose your lunch at the same time, like potentially also. Oh my God, that's crazy. By the way, that's a way cooler story than I had. I was gonna say, you used to put the cups on top of the bar at
Mhm.
Starbucks, and they would pump the syrup and put the cups along the top of the bar. And I remember this woman had a 6 pump hazelnut venti latte, because I like still
Well,
remember
that's
it. Like
excessive.
so, and I pulled it down all over myself, and the hazelnut
Oh no.
syrup got in my hair and everywhere. And it was the beginning of my shift, and I just smelled like hazelnut the rest of the day. And I've never been able
That
since
would do it.
to stomach hazelnut. No, it's true. I mean, I'll eat Nutella every once in a while. I can like get a little, crazy with a little Nutella
Nutella is
flavor, but
yummy.
like hazelnut, it's one of those like very strong core memories.
That's really
I
interesting
just
because
am
it's
reminded.
you touch on again memory and story, and it's tied to. So for me, hazelnut, you mentioned Nutella, was tied to my first time living abroad. I was in Rome. I was staying in this apartment with a roommate, and she put like Nutella on toast, and I was like, Nutella on toast. I was like, and that just
Mhm.
became part of like the memory of being in Rome and all this. And so I think unconsciously that's a positive substrate for my love of hazelnut. And then I also mentioned the Ritter Sport, etc. Whereas you live in an alternate reality compared to me, where it's traumatic. It's like, oh no, I
Yes.
smell like hazelnut all day or something like that.
Yes, I mean, but think about that. That's a really great point, right? There is a story tied to the reason we love every food. And
Mm,
actually, my next question for you is going to be food aversion. Do you have
mm,
any like sort of childhood food aversions or grown up food aversions that come
mhm.
from a particular story?
I love many like cuisines, many types of food, and Japan is up there for me. But there's a couple things they do that I scratch my head on, and the feeling is mutual. But I like sushi as well, and I remember, I grew up in California, and we have like sushi fusion there where you can have like jalapeno on
Yep.
your sushi, etc.
Oh yeah.
And when I first went to Japan, that was like scoffed at. Like, what, you're like kind of polluting our art form
Yes.
here. I was like, what do you mean? It's delicious. And it's building upon it. Then I saw like corn on pizza. And I was like, why are you putting corn on pizza? And mayonnaise used as a condiment for like different
No.
different foods. And I was like, you have such an amazing cuisine. Like, what do you like in this? I couldn't understand it. And then I realized, that there's just different tastes and different realities. And what we might look strange to someone else.
Don't put
I,
mayonnaise on my sushi. Just real talk.
yeah,
No,
exactly. I
not
prefer
acceptable.
mayonnaise used very sparingly, if at all.
Yeah. No, and that's thick too. Like mayonnaise is
Mm.
already really thick and stinky, frankly, in my mind, and the Japanese mayo is even thicker and stickier. Yeah, I don't understand. I just like personally can't understand mayonnaise in general.
Mm.
I do share your love of chocolate though, and
Mm.
I think that chocolate, I mean, there's so many studies on chocolate too, and like what kind of mood booster they are and
Yeah.
what that kind of does for you too. So I mean, I do think that, and also like the endorphins of sharing a good meal in community can be tremendous for people too. So maybe
Right.
that's also a coaching format, right? Like, it's how do you use, food, community, and the things that make you happy, and like those small pieces of joy, like chocolate, to, be a part of your story as well. And not like something that's a throwaway, not something
Mm.
that's like, oh, I had a piece of chocolate because it made me feel better. No, there's like
Mm.
real value in doing that. It's not just a
Mm.
joke and a throwaway. It's something that's part of I had a really wonderful meal after getting a rejection with somebody that I cared about, with one of my top connections. And it made it better because that person reminded me, and the food was great, and we enjoyed a meal together. So, I mean, I do think snacks are important too, because snacks throughout the day are what get you through, right? Like if you're in difficult meetings or you're in challenging scenarios, like those are the things that, like, the little pieces of joy that can kind of help you. Or
Mm.
if it's in the case of mayonnaise, little pieces of sadness that you would like to avoid at all costs. So, we
Yeah.
all have emotions tied to the stories we tell, and food is tied to all of those stories too. So I think that's a
Yeah.
lovely place to stop. I'm not going to judge you for the hazelnuts. I'm thrilled that you hate mayonnaise as well. So that, or dislike, maybe you're not strong feeling about it as I am. But give us a quick, tell us a little bit about what you're up to right now, where we can find you. So if we want to come track you down.
Thank you, Kate. It was a real pleasure speaking with you today, as always. So, my name is David Lovejoy. You can find me on LinkedIn. The platform that we mentioned at the top of the conversation is CoachFinder.ai. Boutique, curated, all the coaches are vetted. And so, if you are facing a plateau or transition or want to reach your potential, I encourage you to head on over there, say, match me with a coach, and unlock your future. And if I may, if you like this conversation or like to see more, of course, happy to come back on anytime, Kate. I also co-host a podcast on business development. It's called Builders and Doers. It's relatively new, a couple dozen episodes so far, but you can head on over to YouTube at Builders and Doers and check that out.
Love that. Love that. Well, it has been delightful to have you here, and I would love to do many, many more. I feel like we could have a whole series about, our thoughts on coaching and people in general, and just go off on tangents that maybe no one would want to hear except us. But really delightful conversation. So thanks for joining us. And thank you everybody here at Career Hacks and Snacks for watching, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.